All right, let's talk about free trade. We've all heard the arguments for it, right? But what happens when those really clean, elegant theories from a textbook crash into the messy, complicated real world? Today, we're going to dig into that, using arguments from Ian Fletcher's work to see if the theory actually holds up. So, the whole modern argument for free trade pretty much boils down to this one big idea: comparative advantage. You've probably heard of it. It comes from the economist David Ricardo, and it's simple, really. If every country just does what it's best at, what it produces most efficiently, and then trades for everything else, everybody wins. It sounds perfect. But here's where things get a little tricky. Even people who are huge fans of globalization, like the columnist Thomas Friedman, talk about this split between their brain and their eyes. His mind was telling him the theory had to be right, but what he was actually seeing on the ground, well, that was a completely different story.
And that's really the big question we're tackling today. What did his eye see? What happens when you stop looking at the models and start looking at the real world? What does it tell us about how global trade actually works?
Okay, so let's just quickly go over that textbook promise again. It's a beautiful picture, right? A world where every country finds its sweet spot, specializes, and through trade, we all get richer together. Sounds simple? Sounds great. Yeah, but that perfect theory depends on a few key assumptions. And as we all know, the real world is almost never that simple. So let's put this promise to the test with a real, high-stakes example of a company that went all in on this idea. And that brings us to our reality check. We're going to look at a project that shows exactly what happens when that promise of global outsourcing slams into the hard facts of manufacturing. So our case study is Boeing's 787 Dreamliner. Now, the plan for this plane was a perfect example of free trade theory in action. Find the best, most efficient company for every single part, no matter where they were in the world, and then just snap it all together at the end. And just look at the global scale of this thing. The wings were being made in Japan, super important parts of the main body came from Italy, dozens of other pieces came from all over the planet. The US was basically just left with the final assembly. On paper, this should have been the most efficient way to build a plane, ever. But that is not what happened. The project got bogged down with just crippling delays, costly mistakes from suppliers overseas. It was a mess. In the end, Boeing had to completely reverse course and promise to bring more of the design and production back home. The textbook promise, well, it failed a huge real-world test. Okay, so the Boeing example is about one company's strategy. But what about the entire system? Is the global game of trade actually being played by the rules the theory assumes everyone is following? According to the analysis we're looking at, to really get to the bottom of this, you have to do one thing: follow the money. It's not just about what goods are being swapped, it's about how we're all paying for them. And this is where that idea of a trade deficit becomes so important. The source points out that it's actually pretty simple. When a country buys stuff from overseas, it can only pay in three ways. One, with stuff it makes today, that's balanced trade. Two, with stuff it made yesterday, in other words, by selling off its assets. Or three, with stuff it promises to make tomorrow, by going into debt. And this lays out the difference perfectly. Paying with what you make right now, that's sustainable. But constantly paying for what you're buying today by selling off your family heirlooms or maxing out your credit cards, the source argues that's a one-way ticket to a massive transfer of wealth. So this brings us to the winners and losers. And that transfer of wealth we just talked about, it's not some abstract idea. The source points to some very real, very tangible consequences. Check out this number. According to projections cited in the source, by 2013, government-owned investment funds in Asia were on track to hold $12.2 trillion. And where did that money come from? Largely from their trade surpluses with countries like the United States. And what do you do with all that cash? You go shopping. You buy pieces of other economies. And the examples are pretty wild. Abu Dhabi investing billions to keep Citigroup afloat, funds from Kuwait and South Korea bailing out Merrill Lynch, and maybe the most eye-opening of all, a Chinese fund buying a big chunk of a top Wall Street firm specifically to learn how to do corporate takeovers. This leads to another really crucial point in this whole argument, the idea that America's economic power was built on free trade. The source suggests we might want to take a closer look at the history books. So let's just ask it straight up. Has the United States always practiced what it now preaches to the rest of the world? Now, this is fascinating. The source points out something that kind of blows your mind. All four of the presidents on Mount Rushmore, the icons of the American way, were all, in fact, protectionists. They believed in using things like tariffs to protect and build up America's new industries. So the core argument here is that for most of its history, America's playbook for getting rich looked nothing like the free trade model it promotes today. The claim is that its success was actually built on the very protectionism that free trade theory says you should never do. This brings us to a final and absolutely critical idea. What do you lose when your country stops making things? Well, according to this manufacturing CEO, you lose a lot more than just factory jobs. You break the link, the feedback loop between the people making things and the people inventing the next new thing. The factory and the lab need each other. And that really leaves us with a final, pretty powerful question. If we stop thinking about trade as just a way to get cheaper stuff as consumers and start thinking about it as a set of choices that decide what we can make as producers, well, that changes the whole conversation. It's not just about efficiency anymore. It becomes about what kind of economy and really what kind of country we're choosing to build.